into the online broadcast network, AFTERBUZZ TV. Over 20 million weekly downloads in over 150 countries, and your number one source for after-show entertainment. AFTERBUZZ TV, the destination for TV superfans, producing after-shows for over 300 of your favorite TV shows, interviewing celebrities and showrunners, and bringing you behind-the-scenes exclusives. All thanks to E! Entertainment's Maria Menounos, producer Kevin Undergaro, and internet leader Akamai. Now, let the buzz begin!
Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is another edition of the Spotlight On. Very excited to be here. As always, we always have a special guest. Today, it's none other than Pastor Timothy Alden. But before we get into talking to Mr. Alden, want to make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's YouTube.com/AFTERBUZZ TV. Also, make sure you check us out on YouTube and SoundCloud. And for the sake of this, if you want to tweet about this episode, make sure you use the hashtag ABTVPOD. That's for AFTERBUZZ TV Preachers of Detroit, because Pastor Alden is from that show. And I am your host, Lem Gonsalves, and you can find me always on social media, and that's at The Poet Saint, and that's on Twitter and Instagram. Of course, I'm not by myself, but I have my partner in crime. Partner in crime, tell them who you are and where they can find you, sir.
I'm the people's favorite.
As they say.
No, I am Gary Thomas, and of course you can find me, of course, Instagram and Twitter. I am Gary Thomas, and I am GaryThomas.com.
Yes, and as I said before, we have our guest today is none other than the pastor of City of Praise Christian Church here in the city of Los Angeles, Pastor Timothy Alden. Welcome, sir. How you doing?
Great, man. It's great to be with you guys.
Yes. I'm excited. So this is the third person that we've had from the Preacher of Detroit after show.
Showing us a lot of love.
Yeah, a lot of love. This is really dope. I really like, and it's like they're reaching out to us,
yes,
which is amazing. We did have to wrangle Pastor Alden. He didn't reach out to us. We had to get him and lasso him to get him here. But nonetheless, he's here.
Y'all found me
excited.
at the gym.
Okay, that's right.
Look how God works.
He did.
Look how God works.
I'm working out
Lifting weights for Jesus. I love it. So, just a little bit about yourself. I do know you were adopted when you were young. You did mention that on, I believe it was the pilot episode of the show. Why don't you tell us about kind of how that happened?
Well, I was basically kicked out by my white family.
Okay.
And black families took me in, and one of them happened to go to a Pentecostal church. I was raised Catholic, being Italian, and so I was invited to this Pentecostal church. I had never experienced anything like that in my life. They're clapping, they're shouting, the choir singing. I'm like, this is what I'm talking about right here. So I kept coming every Sunday, and basically, as my life continued on that journey, I got called to the ministry, and I connected with the people on the show that are my parents, which they were my pastors first.
Okay.
And then I got close to the family, and before you know it, I was living with them, and the rest is history.
Now,
just like family ever since.
At what age were you called into the ministry?
About 17.
17?
Yeah.
Wow. And you're 18 now? Is that correct? It's been a year now? It's been a year?
I wish.
So speaking of that, there's you have a very specialized ministry. It's kind of, I remember seeing you first in Preachers of LA.
Yes.
And you did a guest spot there, and you did at one of the churches that was featured there, you did talk about abstinence.
Yes.
And when you appeared on this show, that was kind of the first thing that came up, and something that you talk about. And you do proclaim to be, correct me if I'm wrong, but a 50-year-old virgin.
That's correct.
Never had sex, never also kissed a woman.
Absolutely
correct?
Yes,
okay. So we get a lot of people talking about this.
Let's dive right into it. I don't got time for all the dilly-dally. Because I said in the very first episode, I was like, wait a minute. This is a little bit hard to believe, because let's think about just culturally, what we are dealing with. We're dealing with a white man who has some swag to himself, and that's like the token thing for black women. That's the thing that is going on. So it was hard for me. I'm like, wait a minute. I've been in Detroit. How was this? Was the temptation hard? Was this, what was it like going through this all these years?
Well, I tell, when I do abstinence presentations, first of all, I don't try to, sugarcoat anything. I'm very straight talking. I'm not a virgin because I never had the opportunity to have sex. And I'm not a virgin because I never wanted to have sex. But when I came to this Pentecostal church at 16 years old, never feeling the Spirit of God like I felt like that, God literally apprehended me with a calling, and I didn't want to do anything that displeased him. And as I continued on that journey, I discovered what an important issue this is as it relates to sexual morality, purity, what an important issue is for our youth. So as time went on, I got more passionate because I saw the kind of damage it does to the family, the kind of damage it's done. I mean, let's keep it real, to even other people in ministry. I mean, how many ministers have had terrible falls and scandals because of a lack of discretion as it relates to their sexuality? So I felt like this is an issue that God had handpicked me to champion, but I couldn't tell people, you know, just talk the talk. I had to literally walk the walk. So I've really committed myself that if I never get married and never have sex, I'm good with that.
You're fine with that.
I'm good with that.
Oh, you're a better man than me, sir. I don't have that calling in the name of Jesus. But I mean, I think that God calls people for where they are. He calls people for a specific purpose, and he won't put more on you than you can bear. So if he calls you to do a thing, he's going to equip you. I firmly believe that. So I champion you in that. Now you do have some people that, you know, kind of come with that, and I'll just get right into it. Your castmate, you know, Pastor Bullock. Now we did our after show on Sunday, and he actually called in as a guest, and this came up because we were talking to him and the situation. I told him, I said, hey, we got, you know, Pastor Alden coming in for a spotlight. And I remember the scene, one of the scenes that you were on the show, where you had went and you were invited to speak for, I'm not sure if it was an abstinence presentation or was it just something more along the lines of just being sexually pure, something along those lines. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, I was told it was a Bible study and that he wanted me, he thought my testimony would be really great.
Okay.
And he was really, you know, apologetic for how things started off with us. And he really wanted to get this message across.
Okay.
So I came into the situation with one impression, but it turned out to be something quite different.
So his side, and I'll tell you what he said. He said basically that when you were invited there, it was something that was going on after. There was going to be another event that was happening afterwards. So there was a short amount of time. And he said that he had given you a certain amount of time. I think it was like 30 minutes. And he said that you had gone past that. Which,
15 minutes past.
Right, 15 minutes past.
He didn't tell me there was any, he didn't say, you know, I need you to be done by this time.
By a certain time.
He didn't say any of that.
Again, this is what he said. And so when we see, and we know that editing happens, you know, if you now that you're part of a television show, you can see how editing works and how it can work to your favor and not to your favor. And all we see is, you know, you kind of doing your thing and then engaging the people, and then he gets up and, you know, stops you and you're kind of like thrown off. He said he did it because of the time constraint, but he also said that because of your message, he felt that it was relevant to teenagers or people that had never had sex before, but for someone that was older, like maybe in their 30s or maybe had children and was trying to get away, he felt like it wouldn't work for them. So that's why he went afterwards and said, hey, if you jump out of a plane, parachute. And then he started passing out the condom. So that was his take on it. What was your take on it?
Well, that's a ridiculous notion because, first of all, sex is an issue for everybody of all ages. You know. Secondly, all of those people that were older in there have some sons, daughters, nieces, nephews, teenagers that it probably would benefit them to have a conversation because one of my missions is to make sure that people know the truth.
Right.
He mentioned, let me pass out condoms because, you know, if you're going to have it, just in case something might accidentally happen, here's a condom. Well, you're not going to accidentally have sex. You know, it's going to be an intentional thing you're going to do. And he made the analogy of, which was something that was in my presentation about, you know, if you're going to jump out of a plane without a parachute, he says, well, here's a parachute. Well, you have a responsibility that if I hand you a parachute and tell you to jump out the plane, if there's a 50-50 chance that parachute isn't going to work, I need to tell you that. And the reality is, if you read the labeling on the package of the condoms, it does not say that condoms prevent STDs. It says they only reduce the risk of STDs. So I want youth to know, if you're going to use a condom, you just need to know that it's risky because there's a chance that the condom is not going to work. You can still catch a lot of STDs. It's the one that is most notable in reducing the risk of is HIV. But HPV, which is skin-to-skin contact, which is a leading cause of cervical cancer in women, all kind of other diseases that can still be transmitted with a condom on. Otherwise, and also condoms break. I mean, don't stake your life on a little thin piece of latex rubber that the government won't even approve and say it reduces the risk. So I had a problem with him not giving the whole message. Now, as it relates to time, he made time to let the audience give me their feedback without allowing me to respond. So it was
you don't
kind
see
of,
that.
No, you don't see that.
Editing don't work in your favor. Ever.
What was amazing is I think that the idea was let them give him a hard time. But they were so impacted by the message that they were like, well, the one guy said, yeah, Pastor Tim, he better had come correct. But he did. But then they started saying a lot of other things that didn't get on. And he wouldn't let me respond.
I see.
So he made time for that.
Gotcha.
And it is such an important message that I don't think it's something you just want to stick in and say, here's a little 30-minute. If you really believe in the message, and you really believe it's something that needs to get out, then you're going to open the door to that and allow your church to be impacted. And if that's not a message that you embrace for whatever reason, then don't invite me.
Sure.
I think that it comes off as a very singular message. So how does this relate to those who have already had sex or are in a new stage of just, discovering celibacy and going into a new step in their spirituality? Because the message, the way it's being portrayed on the show, it is for someone who has never had sex and is, it hasn't yet surfaced for those who already have taken that step. So where are the dimensions of the message that other people are not seeing?
That's a great question, because I do minister to broad audiences all over the country and even overseas. Just got back from South Africa. The reality is, in South Africa, I just spoke to university students. And mind you, I'm going into South Africa.
Right.
And mind you, I'm American and I'm white. But I mean, they were attentive to that message, not because they've never had sex, but because the message of redemption and grace and hope is always included in that message. It's never a condescending message of, I'm a virgin, sorry that you're not. It's always, there's secondary virginity. God is not just a God of second chances. He's a God of new beginnings. So start again, because if you continue down that path, there's going to be a price to pay. And I'm there to just tell people, these are your options. No one's born a loser. Everybody's born a chooser. So here's your options. You make the choice. I can't impose what I do on everybody.
Right.
But it is you laying out, this is your future, this is your destiny, this is what the Bible says, this is what statistics say. And the crazy thing about the statistics regarding sex is it backs up the biblical idea that the best way sex is to be practiced is between one man and one woman that are married to each other. That's biblical, but it proves out the statistics even among the family that a child born out of wedlock is more likely to end up in poverty. And if they end up in poverty, then they're more likely to be disenfranchised from certain educational opportunities and also could resort to crime or other kind of paths. And I'm not saying that's the one fix-all issue,
Sure.
but I'm saying it's an important foundational issue for our culture. Morality and sexuality go together automatically.
Do you think that this is a message that is not talked about a lot? Because obviously, and you can, I'm sure, attest to that, there's not a lot of people that have your testimony. Sure. So obviously, because you're championing this, do you think, because you've done studies, as you know, you're well versed in what this is, you talk about this a lot in your ministries and traveling, things of that nature, do you think it's something that should be taught more? Do you think that it should be a different approach? Because I think a lot of times in a lot of churches, this topic is very taboo. And so a lot of people don't want to touch on it because they would rather just let God do it, or let the Holy Spirit lead you, and or instead of giving people information and things of that nature. Where do you stand on that?
I think what you're saying is absolutely right on. The church, for this day and time, to reach this generation, we have to be relevant. We have to speak the language. We have to know what's being listened to, what the popular culture is saying. We got to know what we have to counteract. Because the messages they're getting is the Kardashians or Beyonce's drunken love song, which ought to be rated XXX based on the lyrics alone. We have a culture that's driven by sensuality and sexuality, and the dangerous thing is the church ought to be the light. But some of the statistics are the same in the church as they are outside of the church.
Exactly.
So we've got to educate and inspire. Now, when I was growing up in the holiness church, we were afraid to go to the show, because that was a sin. I didn't go to the movies for 10 years.
Hey, let me tell you, I did not go to my first movie until I was 17.
See?
I could not go. And that was sneaking and going. I was a senior in high school, and I had to sneak and go. I told my parents
I
I
went
could
to
go
see
bowling.
The Wiz.
Yeah. Oh,
That's
wow.
what you went to see the
I'm
first
dating
time.
myself.
Yeah, I was like, you really dating yourself.
Like, wait.
I saw Dragging the Bruce Lee story. A little bit newer. But yeah, I know exactly where you're saying. I come from that era. I mean, I come from that type of church, I should say, where it was taboo for a lot of things. But I know that, just to piggyback on what you said, I know that because it wasn't discussed openly.
It was just discussed as the Bible says.
Exactly.
Don't do it.
Exactly.
But it didn't break it down to say, okay, tell me in my language what the ramifications are, because I really believe that we are unique creatures amongst God's creation. Animals don't have God's DNA because he didn't breathe to animals. He breathed into us. So we don't have to make instinctive decisions. Our hormones are going to want to say something. Our instincts are going to say something. But then we can make a moral decision and think about it. I feel like doing this, but I know, or have the information, the inspiration to know this isn't good for me. And I can make that decision to walk away from it. And the church didn't really teach us the real risks involved. They would never mention STD.
Oh, no, not at all.
And I tell young people there's 3 reasons why you should never have sex with somebody you're not married to. STD, STD, and STD. Those are 3 different things, because you're not just a body. You're a body, you're a soul, you're a spirit. And sex is the one thing that you do that affects every aspect of who you are. It affects you physically, it affects you emotionally, it affects you psychologically, and it affects you spiritually.
Do you think this type of message affects your congregation who actually comes to your church? Because there are, a lot of children out of wedlock right now. We do go to church with a lot of people, single mothers and things of that nature. How do you welcome these people in? Because they want to get this message, but it feels like they may be the outcast because of the type of message you're sending.
That's a great question, because I have young ladies that come to my church. One particular young lady came, and her son had never been dedicated, because the pastor of the church that she was in before said that baby was born out of wedlock, so I'm not dedicating that baby. And I said to her, God is a God of forgiveness, God is a God of mercy, God is a God of grace. And I tell my congregation, just because I've never had sex doesn't mean I haven't had to go to God to be forgiven.
Right.
No, Jesus says if you look upon a woman to lust after her, you've already committed adultery in your heart. So I'm not going to lie and say, yeah, I float on the clouds every day speaking tongues, and I never have had to say, that was a lustful thought right there. Lord, forgive me for that. So what I did with this young lady is I said, we're going to dedicate your son, because whatever circumstances got him here, it doesn't matter. He is not a mistake. And I said, and you aren't a mistake. You made a mistake, but it doesn't make you a mistake. So I as much as I'm passionate about that, I'm passionate about getting people redeemed. I had one young man in South Africa that after I finished ministering, he pulled me to the side and he said, man, I did not lose my virginity until I was 19 with my girlfriend. Can I get it back? Absolutely you can. Let me pray with you right now. Tears rolling. One young lady, my cousin took my virginity. My older cousin, molested me. Can I get it back? Absolutely you can. So this is not a message to make it feel like this is unattainable or it's condescending. This is a message of hope, redemption, and grace, because people regret more than they are happy that they've had certain sexual experiences. I think people walk away saying, that ain't really what I thought it was going to be. And I'm really having more regrets. The pain, the shame, the heartbreak, the soul ties, the breaking, when the dude moves on and the girl is sitting there broken, and then the dude moves on, but he really hasn't moved on because he still got her on the brain. Those kind of things, when you lay that case out and say, this is about you beginning again, the response from me is overwhelming, and it makes it worth the sacrifice of living this way.
Okay.
But before we move on, in a personal life, because you have never even kissed a woman, what has your dating life been like?
This is I have a motto that I say: if you don't date, you won't fornicate.
So you don't date.
People get upset with me about that. He's like, if you don't date, how do you get to know somebody? I believe that one thing we've lost, the art in our culture, and I talked about finding out about being invited to the show in the gym, because I'm in the gym.
Yeah.
I work out at 24 Hour Fitness in North Hollywood.
Okay.
And so
my gosh, dude.
Right.
I know.
The
I've been
craziest
there before.
24 Hour in North Hollywood is the most jam-packed. Oh, man, I don't know how you do it now.
Call it Club 24.
Right, that is Club 24 for real.
But what you see is in our culture is if somebody sees somebody looks good to them, it's like, let me get your number, let me take you out to a romantic dinner, let me get into bed with you.
Right.
We have lost the art of developing friendship. I think there are no relationships that last because the sex is good. Relationships last because there's a friendship bond that was established before. And so
I agree
my
with that.
motto is you start at a friendship level, which means there's boundaries there. I don't call it a date, because if I'm going out with a friend, I'm not saying I'm going on a date with my homeboy. No, we're not going on a date. Get that straight right now.
Right.
But there's certain boundaries where you're not delving too deep into the emotional intimacy aspects, because when you get emotionally intimate with someone and
Mm-hmm.
y'all texting each other every day and all time tonight, and I'm going to bed, what you doing, and all that is going on, it's gearing you up and getting you ready for the sexual intimacy. So I think we have to slow it down in our culture. Let's stop jumping straight to the bed with people that we just met 3 days ago. And Steve Harvey has a 40-day rule, a 90-day rule or something. My rule is, no ringy, no dingy, no wed, no bed. Wait until you get married, and your honeymoon will be the bomb.
Pastor Tim, though. Wait a minute. Pastor Tim. So we have danced around this a little bit. I understand friendship, but at what point in time does someone become pastor's girlfriend or pastor's significant other?
It would never be a girlfriend.
You're never going to be friendships, and then we're just like, I'm going to give you a ring, friend.
Courtship, friendship, courtship, marriage, which means if I take it further than a friendship, then marriage is my intention.
That's the
Always.
sole intention.
Right.
So I'm not going to play with, and to be honest with you, being a pastor, and preaching, and there's a draw and there's an attraction there.
Sure.
Women have been hurt in past relationships, so you have to put the boundaries up, because you don't want to play with a woman's emotions when she's already been wounded and hurt.
Right.
If I'm not serious about marrying you, then we're not going to be close. We're going to have a boundary relationship.
Right.
But if I really meet that special someone, I'm not ruling that completely out either. So maybe I might be single until I die and go to heaven. But if I'm not, it would be a person that I can not just feel a physical attraction for. And don't get me wrong, that's an important aspect.
Sure.
But there has to be a marriage of purpose and destiny. And I think that the purpose, we wouldn't get so centered around our relationship. We get centered about what we each have been called to do.
Right.
And I think that makes a relationship more healthy.
Okay. Well, I want to move into Preachers of Detroit, the show.
right.
And I want to find out, first of all, how did you get on the show? Like, I know that you were, again, we talked about this before, you were a guest spot on Preachers of LA. Was it because of the connection there, and they decided because you were from Detroit to automatically, because it's kind of from the same production team? How did that come about?
Well, the production team, of course, is headed by Lem Plummer.
Right.
L Plummer Media, and his dad, Glenn Plummer, is a pastor in Detroit. Well, years ago, his dad interviewed my dad and me and my brother on the show. And the show was kind of supposed to be about Father's Day and father-son legacies, which was a great topic. But when I, said I'm still a virgin, and at the time I was 40-something, he was like, hold it.
Time out.
Right, time out. So he kind of delved in deeper into the interview regarding that. And what ended up happening is his son had called him and said, I really feel like I need another guy to be on the Preachers of LA show. And he says, I got the perfect guy for you, Tim Alden. So because I already knew his dad, and then Lemmy comes from Detroit, and even though we didn't personally know each other, we felt like we did because we came around the same beat, the same neighborhood, and had all the mutual friends. So he wanted to pull me into the cast of Preachers of LA. But they decided that they would go with the other white guy. And they wanted a white guy.
You can only have one
Only
per
white
show.
guy per show.
That's the quota. That's the quota.
And so I kind of left it alone. And the whole season went by, and I said, oh well. And then it came back around, and they called and wanted me to do the guest spot with the Cheneys and with Dietrich. And I already know Dietrich from Detroit as well. So I was the guest spot on there, and then I was kind of like, okay, we'll see if there's going to be a season 3 of Preachers of LA, because they were like really thinking that'd be great.
Sure.
But then I didn't hear anything about it, so I just kind of lay low. And next thing I know, I get this call from the producer, Lemmy, and saying, we're doing Preachers of Detroit, and I really think you need to be on the show. I said, but I don't live in Detroit. I'm not moving back to Detroit.
Right.
I pastor here in LA. And he's from Cleveland, so he knows what I'm talking about. And so he says, no, I think we can make it work. You're from Detroit, you care about the city. And I do go back to see my family, and I go back to minister at different churches. I mean, I got my start there. So that's how I ended up being on the POD show.
Gotcha. Yeah. Now, we talked a little bit about this earlier, but Pastor Alden, you're like non-existent. You're like the silent
Casper on this
silent
whole show.
pastor. And I'm like, he was in the pilot episode and like a bit on the one episode, and then that's it. It was like 3 episodes. So what do you think, in your opinion? I mean, and we talked about this earlier, but you did say you've taped, a lot. There's a lot of footage, so it's not for lack of that. Now, my personal opinion was like, oh, well, he's in LA. Maybe he wasn't out there enough or anything like that. What do you think, in your opinion, is the reason why you're not in more episodes?
Well, it's hard for me to get into the heads of who's making the decisions of
Sure.
what the episodes are going to be and what storyline they're going to follow. But I can only tell you the footage that we provided. My goal was to be authentic, you know, and to be real in whatever I do behind the cameras, I do in front of the cameras. And there's great footage with my family. We had a real conversation about, you know, them meeting me and how they felt about me. And it's a very unusual story. This family that I met in my early 20s started taking to me, and now they consider me like their blood. And how supernatural is that even like my nieces and nephews who were born after I moved to LA still feel that bond with me as their uncle.
Wow.
So we had those kind of moments. We had a great service, a pop-up church in Detroit. All that footage is there, and I'm hoping that before the season ends that you'll see some of
That they show that.
I think that you're very personable, or maybe it's just your storyline didn't spark like the other, because we have these fire behind these pastors, and everybody's kind of like, you know, they give debatable conversations versus where your storyline doesn't make us debate as much. It is what it is. You are very true to yourself, very true to everything that's going on. So could it be that's why you're not visible as much? Because the only time we saw you was when there was, you know, the controversy.
Yeah.
Which I was a little upset about, you know, because I felt like you should have really tagged into Pastor Bullock. But that's neither here nor there. Because I love Pastor Bullock, but I was like, man, Pastor Tim has this fire behind him. I just wanted to see him just stand to his gun. You were like, you know, you conceded and said, you know what, I'm not even going to go there with you, you know.
Some of the stuff that, you know, conversation we did have didn't, of course, was air. But, you know, I'm not a extremely confrontational person. I mean, I have my moments when I'm like on fire, but there are sometimes, you know, Pastor Bullock, he's a politician, he's a debater. And a lot of times debaters, it's hard to get a word in, and they like to talk until the time is out.
Sure.
You know? And so they've talked a whole lot, but you haven't had a chance to address the 10 things they just said.
Right.
And so for me, it was just really challenging. I felt like I had so much more that I wanted to say and express, but it was hard to get a word in, and I'm trying to get a word in. I'm trying not to just be ignorant and be like, hey, shut up. You've been talking too much. You know, maybe that's what you want me to say. Maybe I would have been on an episode if I would have said that. We've heard enough of
I'm
you.
saying, man, the drama sells.
The powwow was like, okay, enough. Like, can we hear from some of the other people here, you know?
Where do you and Bullock stand now?
I mean, we have a cordial relationship.
Okay.
You know, I think there's a certain level of mutual respect there. But I'm not gonna lie and say we agree. We're very different ideologically and theologically on what we believe. Obviously, I would never pass out condoms in my church. Never. It's just not a place for that. Now, do I think if a person is going to have sex that they're safer with a condom? Yes, but I'm not going to say it's safe.
Right.
I'm going to say it's less risky.
Right.
But to promote that, it's almost a mixed message, and I think we got to believe the message we preach. We got to tell people it is possible to be abstinent.
And
it
stand
is
by
possible.
it. And stand by it. Absolutely. So, Pastor Tim, I know that you pastor a church here in LA. We talked a little bit before the show about that. Tell us about what's going on there and kind of what's next for you going forward.
Yeah, well, our church has had some growth recently, and it really wasn't from the show. A lot of it started coming before the show. And so we're trying to manage that growth. We got some great youth on fire. We got some real creative people. So just trying to harness all that talent. And one thing about our church isn't huge. It's not a mega church. So I really want to personally have an idea of each member. What is their gift mix? What are they called to do? And how can I, as a pastor, help to train, develop, and release them into that calling? So working on that, raising up leaders. We just recently, we're signing a lease right now to sublease from another church because we've been having church in a hotel.
Okay.
So in fact, we're going to have a church with classrooms for our youth, for our children, for our dance team, for our praise team. You know, it's just going to make things much better for us as a church. But I love what I do. I love people. I love Los Angeles. You know, I love what we have here. I love the creativity. I just think that the creativity here is misguided, and we got to get it back on track. You know?
Harness it.
Harness it and get it holy and sanctified, but release it to the masses as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's great, man. I think it's great what you're doing. Like I said, I think that, you know, God has obviously equipped you for a certain purpose and a certain calling, and it sounds like you're walking in that and fulfilling that calling as He's given to you to do, and that's what you're supposed to do, and that's it. End of story. Pastor, I want to thank you for coming in.
It's been a pleasure.
And, being
I just
here.
want to know that I win you over because you weren't sure about me. You said, I don't know about that, Pastor. I said, I want him to interview me because I want him to feel like, okay, yeah, he's
I had something to say. I had to see for myself the man behind this story because I'm like, wait.
I appreciate that. Though. I did.
No, I'm not going with this, y'all. But you know what? I'm like that about Don Shelby. I don't particularly like Pastor Shelby either, but I'm more harder on him than I am you.
Yeah,
very hard on Don Shelby.
He's a very nice man behind the scenes. I can tell you, his family is wonderful. I have a really strong relationship with them. Just from meeting them on the show.
Sure. That's awesome. So again, thank you for coming in. Again, this has been the one-on-one with Pastor Tim Alden. I've been your host, Lem Gonsalves. You can find me on social media at The Poet Saint, and that's on Twitter and Instagram. Gary Thomas, where can they find you, sir?
I am Gary Thomas on Instagram and Twitter, and IamGaryThomas.com.
And Pastor Alden, where can they find you on social media, sir?
Pastor Timothy J on Twitter and Pastor Timothy Alden on Facebook.
Awesome. Thank you again. And until next time, there it is.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.